Hello there. What is going on, YouTubers? Again, I beg your pardon for kind of having to film another video like this. Though I don't find myself so depressed or demoralized as my previous filming sessions over the past several days. Well, at least most recently. I do somehow kind of regained a bit of a more strength and focus on devoting myself to self improvement, self, constant and, well, fairly constant and continuous effort of self actualization and self improvement and blah blah blah. And yet, then yes, I found my newly purchased USB webcam somehow malfunctioning whenever I attempt to connect it to my PC's USB ports. And I'm also kind of feeling lazy to troubleshoot it. So yeah, hence, as you can see, yes, I sourced a fairly cool looking rotating globe and put it at the center, pretty much right at the center of the of the screen of the screen of this particular filming session. And yes, so I just like to talk more, to talk to talk about um death, my own understanding of death and what may or might happen once we die and after we die, and how I imagine, or what I imagine, overcoming the fears of death can help you make breakthroughs in overcome all obstacles and hardships, and on the way of self improvement and self actualizing. So to put it in other words, always prepare to die so that you can go all in without much fear, standing in the way of getting shit or shite done, and so on and so forth. And even I myself, I currently find myself again in a rather um, hesitant or hesitating mindset or mind state, though not necessarily a depressed mind state, as to whether I should, just pack up everything I need to bring along the way and head straight to Thailand, and make a switch in terms of my living and working environment, and also expose myself to other potential you know new potential business opportunities via networking, via attending some seminars or workshops, or meetups face to face in in the heart, right in the heart of Bangkok, Thailand. And and yes, on the other hand, I can then have access to a variety of healthy, tasty, and more importantly, cost effective food. And then I would supposedly well, at least supposedly I will um also have access to, well, relatively speaking, uncensored internet and books and a variety of business and scientific journals and you know publications I can read and try to assimilate and then apply to practical empirical scenarios to better myself, and in turn bring you guys more quality and more engaging, more interesting contents on YouTube, on BitShoot, Rumble, and you know Patreon, etc. Yeah, and and more importantly, I can at least find myself a temporary refuge somewhere else, free from the almost never ending persecutions and harassment from that wicked woman, and thus I can have more time, more strength, more energy to think straight and come to better judgments, better decision making, and hence leading to a more more healthy and efficient and promising trajectory of living a more quality life. Yeah, so on and so forth. At this point, I still refuse to give in to the rhetoric and conditioning and indoctrination imposed by the mainstream society and ruling class, ruling regime of the entire pretty much the entire planet Earth, propagating the notion that you have to get settled, you have to settle for less, you have to commit or devote yourself to the 9 to 5 grind, plus the the role of a sustainer and provider of your spouse and your child or children. Well, in case well, in the event that you get married and decide to reproduce, and thus bringing more meat sacks, more slaves to the system, to the matrix, to this ruthless and heartless, never ending / self-perpetuating meat grinder, so to speak. And yet, the matrix, or I should say the ruling class, just keeps sugarcoating marriage, reproduction, and the life pattern that the vast majority of so-called normies tend to follow and conform to, and thus selling themselves, either both their time and their bodies and their even their dignity, like cows getting milked in exchange for money, in exchange for a false and yet fragile sense of safety and security / a false peace of mind that can at any time in any place gets shattered and taken away by either tech techno technological advancements, or being made or getting made redundant due to the introduction and advent of more, say, well, typically speaking, more cost effective and efficient methods or systems of manufacturing or production or delivery of services and or physical / tangible products, say most typically speaking AIs, or bringing in much cheaper labor forces from, say, from Asia, most typically speaking from Southeast Asia, from China, from India, from even from Japan, South or North Korea, blah blah blah, Mongolia, blah blah blah, you name it. It's just, and then followed by a total societal collapse, characterized by huge huge and gigantic scales of inflation, stagflation, low 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 index of investors and consumers level of confidence in the economy, in the market prospect overall, blah blah blah, and yes, and yeah, I beg your pardon for getting a bit sidetracked, but yeah, the what I'm trying to say here, what I'm mainly trying to say for this filming session is that you need to you need to stop fearing death. You need to learn to stop getting attached to anything and anyone in this world during this freaking pathetic, arduous, and exhausting life. Um, well, since death implies the total cessation of all biological functions and mechanisms, and which include but are not limited to chemical and biochemical reactions, say synthesis, um, synthesis and metabolisms within your body, and and then you once you die, your whole association and connections and bonds with this world will get completely severed and cut off. This connected once and for all, just like whenever you plug out a removable piece of hardware from your PC, from your computer, or say Mac, blah blah blah, and then yes, the once the electricity supply gets cut off, all the activities stop. And though yes, though for those data stored in non-volatile memories, say flash memories, they will still remain somehow, which kind of begs the question as to whether we get reincarnated in our next life or next lives, that come after this one. But I seriously doubt that we get we get reincarnated once we kick our buckets. I believe that once we kick our buckets, we either go to heaven or hell, or just cease to exist in this whole dimension completely, and we just go back to the previous state of non-existence, which I consider to be the ideal, the most ideal state, or the most ideal state of matter, or state of space and time. And since bear in mind that well, a clinical death usually and generally suggests that the brain activities stop, your heart stop ticking and beating, and all the blood flow to your brain stop, and which means you will no longer have any sensation or physical perception of your surroundings, and in turn the whole physical world that encompasses everything and everyone and once crossed paths with, um, stop stop existing, in your mind, and in the whole you know realm, you know in the whole um virtual realm relative to you. Well, I beg your pardon in case that um fails to make sense to you guys. Yeah, but yeah, I just I've been kind of making some, if not loads of preparations for my own death. And all things all things considered, I don't have any children. I never been married, and I don't really have a property. Well, technically speaking, under my name, though yes, some, well, based on some, not exactly rumors, but some texts, you know some texts, messages exchanged between that wicked woman and one of my uncles, that my old man um tra- you know transferred and ownership of a property to me about a couple of years before he kicked his bucket. But I do not have the certificate or the legal paperwork to substantiate or prove to prove that. So so as a result, I don't really like I said, um imagine that I have that much of attachment to, or association, or bonds with this shitty, ruthless, and pathetic world we speak of. you know so I so therefore I imagine that once I kick my bucket, well, at least so I hope, I will rest in peace forever and hibernate for without any pain or agony or afflictions or worries in total eternity. Um, well, which itself I see as heaven, technically speaking. Well, at least so I hope and pray for. Um, and yes, for those that unfortunately have chosen to pop out offsprings, unfortunately their bonds, their association with this world will unfortunately get prolonged, and therefore perpetuate get getting perpetuated until the whole loop, until the whole say the laws, the loops pertaining to all those applicable laws of physics in this universe or cosmos come to an end. They will forever, well, at least within such time frame, linger in some state of limbo, or say a state, or or a status or circumstance characterized by continuous suffering and labor. Well, I come to such you know, judgment and conclusion, based on a bit of a, philosophical and logical deductions and reasonings, and apparently, yeah, according, to all the perceivable and applicable laws of physics, say Newton's Newtonian laws, say, well, most typically speaking, the first, well, not the first, but um most typically speaking, the second law of Newton states, or stipulates that, wherever, whenever there's an action, there is an equal and 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 a reaction in equal amount, but in the opposite di- direction, relative to such action. And yes, also, the first, Newton's first law may also more or less apply here, as far as I assume and perceive, since, since it stipulates that an all object or physical entity, will either stay in motion, or remain in a stationary slash non moving or idle state, unless affected by an external force applied to, or exerted to it, or exerted on it, um and yes, death itself certainly does not occur, it certainly does not occur to me as a stranger, since I've already myself, unfortunately, experienced two consecutive deaths, two consecutive tragic, heartbreaking deaths among my own, immediate family units, First, my old man in mid year 2019, then in early October year 2022, my grandma soon followed. And I suppose, I will, be the one, be another, meat sack that ought to perish next on the line, since, well, there are several reasons. Reason number one, I have pretty much tentatively decided not to reproduce at all, which, in other words, a total rebellion against, say, God's will, God's, the so-called um, cosmic imperative that dictates, the whole course of all terrestrial life forms, that can include, dinosaurs and all those, um, extinct, or at least supposedly extinct life forms, um, documented prehistorically in the form of fossils, in the form of, say, artifacts, and a bit of a maybe also conspiracy theories, blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but I that kind of makes it kind of makes the whole the whole focus of this video deviate and getting sidetracked. For which I beg your pardon, but you get the point. So to put it, long story short, why I suppose, or why I kind of anticipate that I may somewhat likely die very soon, is that I refuse to conform to the to a normie's lifestyle, to a normie's pattern of life, stipulated by the mainstream society and conventional mindset, that has existed amongst the vast majority of human individuals since prehistoric times, since the beginning of human history. So that means, God, or the demiurge, or the ruler of this world will sooner or later consider me highly disposable, highly, say, useless or redundant, you know, relative to the vast majority of NPCs, breeders, or slash normies population, blah blah blah. So yeah, I do, so all things considered, yes, and yes, I did, yes, give away two of my silver coins to my newly born nephews, since I no longer need them, and I do kind of felt I did kind of feel the urge to give, and and those two silver coins, I kind of I they weren't really my old man's belongings or possessions, since I kind of started learned how to invest in precious or noble metals since early childhood, though I did so quite unconsciously or subconsciously. I just found them, found those coins quite visually appealing, and pleasant, to rub off with my hands every now and then, and to just to to grab them and play with them, gives me some sort of satisfaction, and yes, also scientifically speaking, rubbing off your skin, and well, in particular your hands with silver, with gold, or platinum, well, or platinum, does have some sort of antiseptic or bacterial effects, which I suppose does count as a major part of the benefit. And yes, and those two silver coins, I do, you know well, to put it in biblical terms, I gave them away to my newly born nephews quite happily, quite cheerfully. Yes, I did kind of though, yes, during the process of decision makings as to which coins I would like to give away. Yes, I did took some time as to whether I should give give them something more highly valued or highly rare, highly precious amongst my range of collections. Though yes, I then kind of then dismissed the thought uh, you know uh, of giving them something more valuable, but instead I kind of just you know gave away two of my least favorite silver coins to them. That's the absolutely honest truth. And and on the other hand, I find it quite hard, maybe next to impossible, to to convert those items I do consider highly valuable assets to to cash. So no matter how valuable or how rare how rare those silver coins are, I will pretty much have a rather tough time attempting to bring them overseas and sell them slash you know attempt to kind of monetize them by selling them and thus converting them into cash. So whichever or whatever the outcome, you know, I will have I do anticipate I will have a pretty tough time attempting to to trade them for cash. So yeah, or to fiat currencies, despite the fact that they do exist and stand as some sort of permanent assets, so long no matter whether I live to see the end of this shitstorm or shite storm. So yeah, yeah. In any regards, I hope I have made my points clear. And yeah, I don't at this point I kind of find myself a bit of erratic, maybe a bit uh, overhyped. I don't know for sure. I'll let you guys be the judge. So in any regards, thank you very much again for for listening to me ranting and venting. Though not necessarily during you know um, because of the fact that I suffer from severe depression and blah blah blah. But yeah, but yeah, I just I am currently still hesitating whether I should be heading straight to Thailand after I pack up everything I need along the way, and try to make arrangements to make sure that that wicked woman does not break in into this property, into this flat, and therefore um, take over of everything, and then forces me into total submission and blah blah blah. So yeah, I really at this point I don't really know, or I can't really anticipate what the future may hold or may unfold for me. except the fact that sooner or later I would just kick my bucket. It's just a matter of time, and in which form, in due to what cause or causes I I will die. But yeah, in any regards, yeah, in order to overcome the fear of death, of losses, you more or less have to get prepared to die. And I know it sounds highly paradoxical and highly counterintuitive. I just, see no other alternative to push forward with my shitty life after losing so much. My mental health, my old man, my grandma, even my own self belief, self dignity, self esteem, and confidence. So yeah, in regards, I believe I suppose I've talked long enough. So thank you very much again for tuning in and listening to my grievances. I hope you guys all are having a wonderful day or night, and if God willing, see you soon again on YouTube or on BitChute, Rumble.com, and maybe in the future, in case I get to live to see the end of this state of misery and total dystopia. Hope to meet up with you guys face to face and buy you guys a coffee or a meal and have more chinwags about philosophy, about the meaning of life and death themselves. Thank you. Take care and yeah, stay out of trouble. Cheers. Bye.